Hello, and welcome to another episode from EasyHealthyBread.com, where I show you step-by-step video tutorials on how to bake with healthy, real whole foods. I don't know about you, but I love a good snack. But lately I've been really disappointed from what I've been finding at the grocery store. Brand name crackers are full of additives and preservatives, and their organic counterparts cost an arm and a leg. So today I'm going to show you how to make a healthy cracker from scratch. It's not as hard as you think, and it's super delicious. Let's get started. So we're just going to be doing this in our regular mixing bowl today. You don't need a mixer for this recipe at all. So we're going to start with 1 3/4 cups of flour. So 1 cup of whole wheat flour, scoop and sweep method. I just use my finger these days. 1 cup in, and then 3/4 cups. I'm just using my normal whole wheat flour that you can get from the store. I usually use King Arthur flour or from a local granary that I'm lucky to have access to, which they grind their own right on site. So we have 1 3/4 cup flour, and then we're going to do a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Everybody knows crackers are on the salty side, so we got to add a little in. Like I say, usually if you're watching your salt, skip it. So you can definitely skip it. So we're just going to mix this up a little bit, make sure we get the salt all in there, and then we're going to add some coconut oil. If you watched my video on the whole grain biscuits, you'll recognize what I'm going to do next with this pastry tool. So we need 5 tablespoons of coconut oil. Coconut oil, a solid, is a little bit more difficult to work with, especially when you're trying to measure it out and you need it to be a solid. So we definitely need it to be in solid state. So I already measured out 4 of the 5 tablespoons, and I'm going to pop them in, but I'll show you how I did, how I was able to measure it. It's a little bit of a messy situation, but it's not too bad. So I'm going to move this aside. So I have my 1 tablespoon, and I have a spoon here. So I'm going to take my spoon, and I'm just going to get some coconut oil out of here. My coconut oil is solid in here, but I do keep it sitting out, and so it's maybe a tiny bit warmed up. So you just put maybe what your rough estimate of what you think you're going to need in the tablespoon, and then you just take the back of your spoon and push it right in. So you're trying to get it so when you scoop it out, it kind of looks like that perfect ice cream scoop from the ice cream shop. You want to be exactly the shape of your tablespoon, and that's how you know you've been accurate. So press it in really good there. See it squirting out the sides, and then top it off. Good, I think we're good there. And then to get it out, I just take the spoon I just used to get it in there, pop it right out, take out any extra I missed. Bingo. So now we've got our coconut oil in there. So now we're going to take our pastry tool, and just like we did with the biscuits, we're going to mash it up into the flour. You want the coconut oil to stay in whole pieces, but you want those pieces to be small. So that's kind of what we're going for here. Just keep going until you have small pea-sized pieces of coconut oil kind of mixed in with your whole wheat flour. Okay, so after we've finished breaking up that coconut oil with the pastry tool, you can kind of see it's kind of chunky, and you've got pieces like this of coconut oil kind of covered in the flour. So now we're going to add honey. We're adding 2 tablespoons of honey, and to make it easier to come out, we are going to take just a tiny bit of that coconut oil, since it's sitting right here, and just wipe it into the tablespoon here, and that's just going to make the honey slide out easier, and it's going to make your measurement more accurate since you're not going to get a whole bunch left in the bottom of your tablespoon. So we're going to do 2 tablespoons of honey here. after the honey, we're going to add a little bit of vinegar and a little bit of vanilla. So we're going to need about 1/4 teaspoon of each. So I have white vinegar here. It's probably in just about every household because you can use it for so many different things. And just 1/4 teaspoon, carefully. There you go. And then 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. You can see I don't use the fancy stuff, especially in a recipe like this where it's honestly not going to make all that much of a difference. So I've got 1/4 teaspoon there. And we are just going to mix that together. A little bit, get that kind of going together. Not going to look all that different. And now we're going to slowly start to add our water. We're going to start with cool water. You're going to need about 1/4 cup, but you could need a little bit more, so I've poured a little extra. And you just want to pour it in slowly and just until the dough is just combined. So similar to what we did with the biscuits. So we're just gonna slowly start combining and kind of go by when the dough starts to come together, then it's probably ready to be together. So you can see it's starting to come together like this. We're actually going to turn it out onto a floured surface and knead it a few times. So let me get set up for that and we'll be right back. So we're just going to knead it a couple times. If you're familiar with kneading, it's kind of like a turn and palm motion like that. Then I do 1/4 turn and palm, and 1/4 turn and palm. You can see it's picking up that flour, so we're kind of redistribute it there. 1/4 turn and palm. We're just going to do this a couple times. We don't want the dough to get too tough, which is what it will do if we knead it too much, just like any other type of pastry dough, like a pie. So mine looks pretty solid, came together fine. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wrap this in some saran wrap, and I'm going to pop it in the fridge for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to get started making the crackers. I'll catch you back then. Okay, we're back. I have just pulled the dough out of the fridge. You can leave it in there for as long as you need to, but just make sure you get in there for about 10 to 20 minutes at least. And we are going to roll them out. So we're going to grab a little flour here and sprinkle it on our surface. A little trick for flouring your rolling pin, I just roll it over my flour before I bring it out and kind of get it, you can kind of get an even distribution that way. We don't want to use too much flour here, but we are going to need a little to keep them from sticking. So I'm going to start like this. You'll feel it's pretty sticky, and I'm actually going to take this and just press it out. We're going to have to roll these pretty thin to get them to be crisp like crackers. So we'll start like this, and we won't have to add any flour. We'll start by doing it by hand. So just get it as thin and even as you can. You see it comes up pretty easily. And let's just check and make sure it's not sticking on the counter. And if it is, just get like a sharp spatula if you're catching any areas. And so mine came up pretty good. I'm actually going to do that again, just because I really don't want these to stick, because they're going to be really thin when we're done, and so it's not going to be really very much fun if they stick. So there's that. Put this back on. Okay, so we're going to start rolling. And you're going to want to try your best to get these as even as possible. want to get them, like I said, very thin. You want them to get very thin because you know what a cracker is like. You know what those wheat type of crackers I'm thinking of in that yellow box are like. They're really thin, and that's what makes them crispy. So we have to make ours just as thin to get them crispy. So just try and make sure that the edges are the same thickness as the middle. You can do that by kind of applying even pressure. It's a little hard for me because this counter's kind of tall and I'm kind of short. But if you're on the lower counter, it can be easier because you can kind of just exert equal pressure. So you can see it keeps getting bigger. And I'm just going to continue rolling these until they are thin enough. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to cut them with a pizza cutter. So that's going to work really well, and you can get them nice and easy. You can make the cuts really quick. If you want to do something fancy, you're making these crackers for some sort of fancy occasion, you can use the pastry wheel, and they're kind of have a wavy blade, and they'll kind of make an S shape kind of in the dough, and then it'll kind of give them something different. If you have a lot of time on your hands, you could even use like a cookie cutter and make them fun shapes, but you're going to end up with weird outlines if you do it that way, and you really don't want to re-roll a dough because it's just going to make it really tough. So I'm just going to cut mine with the pizza cutter as soon as I feel like we're thin enough. Okay, so it looks good. I'm going to grab my pizza cutter and we're going to cut these up. So I've grabbed my pizza cutter and I'm just going to take the saran wrap off the dough. You can see, if I can get it to hold up here, that it's pretty thin. And yeah, I got a couple spots that stick, but if you just kind of yank it through the spots that stick, you'll be all good. So if you really care about your crackers being exactly the same size, then you're going to want to be a little more careful with how you roll it, because I'm going to have weird shapes here. But I am going to make them vaguely square. So I'm just going to roll like this. You can see it's kind of sticking up there. So just kind of watch it. Maybe I'm going to do a little flour here. Okay, so we've dipped that in flour. It goes just nicely right through. I kind of like my crackers a little bigger, maybe bigger than the crackers we're emulating here. Better for cheese and dip and just snacking. So I made mine a little bit wider. And then we're just going to go. And just keep in mind that the smaller you make the crackers, it's going to be more of a pain in the butt to put them on the sheet. So that's why I err on the side of a little bit bigger. Because it just ends up being easier, and who doesn't want a bigger cracker? I mean, really. So you can see it's just got the nice grid pattern going. You might get some to stick, but since they're pretty floured on the bottom, we're kind of fine. They just will pop back down. And when you get areas where, like, if you made the cut all the way through, this would be tiny, just don't cut all the way through. Just leave it. Like, I'm just going to cut these two big guys here. So I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees. I'm going to move these to a parchment lined baking sheet. I'm going to place them so they have a little bit of space, but they're not going to rise, so they're just not going to be so close together as this, just so they bake evenly. And I'm going to pop them in the oven and watch them carefully for about 7 to 10 minutes until they're golden brown. And I'll show you what they look like when we're done. Okay, we're back. So I've pulled these out of my 400 degree oven. Depending on the thickness of your cracker, they could take anywhere from 7 minutes to 15 minutes. Mine were a little on the thick side, so they definitely took a little longer. Just keep a close eye. If this is your first time making crackers or something like this, or you have a small counter like I do, I would definitely take that first ball of dough, split it in half, or maybe even in quarters, and roll it out one piece at a time. It's just going to give you a lot more control over the dough, and you're going to be able to make them thinner. I made that mistake, and so you shouldn't have to. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. It's been really fun to make, and quite frankly delicious. I love a good cracker. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have a new video every week that features easy, healthy bread with whole food ingredients. Thanks!